Good morning, good afternoon, or welcome. This is Larry Hanley, IT Specialist here at WHAS TV. Today we're here for WHAS Security Awareness Training. This is a 2018 session. We did a session like this about a year ago, but we felt like it was way too long and there was a lot of information that was overly technical, so we've decided to completely rewrite the presentation to make it a lot more practical and give you more actual strategies. They say brevity is the soul of wit, so I'm going to be really witty today. There's three things we're going to talk about. Number one is unauthorized access to data or devices. Number two is outside intrusion attempts. And number three is malware infections and phishing. I refer to these three things collectively as the triad of threats. The reason I call them that is because, well, it actually sounds pretty clever. This is basically the three-headed monster of cyber threats and the things that we have to be concerned about these days when it comes to security. So first, let's talk about who's targeted and what are the consequences of being a victim. First of all, most security breach attempts today are usually aimed at exploiting users, their unsafe habits, risky behaviors, and their lack of awareness and lack of vigilance. Secondly, we can have firewalls, which we do have, and we can lock our servers behind doors, and we can have strong credential requirements and even security software, but none of that's really going to prevent any kind of a cyber breach if users can be exploited in some way. And this is what hackers and attackers look for. They look to find users who are either doing something or not doing something that exposes them to possibly being a victim. So if you are a victim of a cyber attack, you could be exposed to one or more of the following: responsibility for data loss and the resulting reduction in productivity, responsibility for inability to put product on air, disciplinary action, possibly including termination, and even legal action. Those last two are probably pretty extreme and not likely, but they are possibilities depending on the nature of the situation and other factors that may be involved. So if there are no questions, we'll proceed. First thing we want to talk about is unauthorized access to data. I usually refer to this as the equivalent of leaving your door open. The reason you lock your door at your house is because you don't want people to just walk right in and take your stuff, right? Well, it's the same thing. If someone really wants to get in, if they want to get in bad enough, they're going to get in. The idea behind locking up is to try to make it as difficult as possible so it's not worth it to make the effort. Cybersecurity is pretty similar. If someone wants to hack a network or hack a server, they're going to get in. What we have to do is take steps to try to make it as difficult as possible so that it's not worth the effort. So let me give you some specific strategies that you can deploy in order to prevent data access. So first of all, when you save files, make sure that you are saving files, especially sensitive files, to a secure location. Here at WHAS, you have an M drive, you have an O drive, and you can also use OneDrive. Those drives are actually on servers. The M and O drives are on servers, and those servers are backed up. OneDrive is considered to be backed up simply because Microsoft maintains multiple data centers around the country, so your data is safe. If one burns to the ground, for example, they still have other copies of your data. Make sure that you are saving not to your desktop, not to your My Documents folder, because all those files are saved on that local computer, and if that hard drive dies or gets infected, those files are irretrievably gone forever. Secondly, make sure that if you have sensitive documents open and you have to be away from your desk for an appreciable amount of time, make sure you close those documents. Due to the nature of your job, you may have the right to view certain documents with, say, employee information, for example, but anyone walking into your office or by your cubicle may not have a right to see that information. Third thing, do not respond to suspicious requests for information or data. It may come in the form of a phone call, it may come in the form of an email. In either case, don't respond to it. If you're not sure who the person is and you're not sure that they have a right to the information they're asking for, then just refer them to a manager. Tell them you're not the one that should be giving them that information. And also, this is an easy one to forget. Make sure that if you stick a flash drive into a machine to copy a file or whatever, make sure you remove that drive. Reason being, it's easy to forget and leave that drive in there, and someone comes along and finds that flash drive. They now have access to anything and everything that's on it, including those pictures. And hopefully you're not storing things like that on a flash drive. Final thing, and this is something we really don't see enough of, but it's really important that you do this. Make sure that at the end of your shift every day you restart your computer. Don't turn it off because it needs to be on so that we can do updates overnight. But make sure you restart that computer. Don't just leave it at a login screen, because this is the equivalent of locking your screen door, but leaving your main door open. If someone really knows what they're doing, they can get in there. Once they're in there as you, and they have access to everything that you have access to. It's a good idea to do that anyway because Windows tends to get gunked up a little. So just restart that computer before you leave at the end of your shift and you'll be fine. If there are no questions, let's go to our second topic, which is outside intrusion attempts. Here what we're talking about is hackers and spies, individuals or groups of individuals who are trying to gain access to the network through a particular computer or trying to get access to some other device on our network in order to wreak some kind of havoc. So here are some specific things you can do to prevent being a victim of an intrusion. Number one, and this is probably the most important thing you can take from this entire presentation, and that is be cautious of links and attachments in email messages. One really good thing you can do, if you get an email that has a link or an attachment, just stop for 2 seconds and ask yourself a simple question. Should I click this? A lot of times that's going to lead you to other questions such as who sent it? Was it really that person who sent it? Was I expecting this? Was I expecting the attachment? So forth and so on. What hackers want you to do is you see an email and you have a link in it and you go, hey, what's that? Or you see a document attached to an email, you click it and go, what's that? What they want you to do is just do these things without thinking. Stop for just 2 seconds, ask yourself, should I click this? A lot of times that's going to save you from a lot of frustration. Second thing is never respond to an email message with your username and password. There's no legitimate person either here at WHAS or at corporate who's going to ask you for your username and password. You should not ever put that information into an email. It's actually a violation of corporate security policy for anyone in IT to know a user's password, and it's also a violation of policy to have a username and password in the same email. If there comes a time when I have to send someone their credentials, I will send them their username in one email and send another separate email with their password in it. So no one in corporate or here at WHAS that's legitimate is going to ask you for that information. Next thing, do not download and install any software on company computers without authorization from IT. There's software you can install from the software center on your computer. Those programs are already pre-authorized. You don't need to notify anyone. You don't need permission. Any other software, please do not install it without submitting a help desk ticket and make sure we know about it. The software you're wanting to install may be harmless and you may get that software, but you may also get something else that you're not intending. Next thing, do not accept unexpected remote access requests to your computer. We now have the ability to connect remotely to your computer in order to troubleshoot and solve problems. However, you're usually going to know when we're doing that because we'll probably have you on the phone. If you get a box that pops up on your computer that says, hey, this is Joe from corporate, I need access to your computer so I can fix the problem, don't click anything. Don't click yes, don't click no, okay, or cancel, because if this is actually an attack, all of those buttons are probably going to be configured to do the exact same thing. You click, no matter what you click, you're going to wind up giving access, and now you have some guy in his mother's basement in Singapore who's operating your computer as if he's sitting right in front of it, and he now, again, has access to everything that you have access to. So be careful about that. If you get something like that that pops up, leave it on the screen and contact someone in IT. Finally, do not fail corporate phishing tests. Corporate occasionally sends emails designed to get you to click on attachments, click on a link, or enter your credentials. Do not fail corporate phishing tests. Third time, do not fail corporate phishing tests. What happens when corporate issues a phishing test, I get a report that lists everyone that passed or failed. I'm not a snitch, but I am required to report all failures to the general manager. 2 failures, second failure, I'm required to report that to corporate. Now, they're not going to chain you up in the basement and feed you dog food for 3 weeks. I think they've actually shortened that to 1 week. No, actually, what's going to happen is you're probably going to get a pretty stern talking to, and to be honest, you probably should if you fall for the kind of things that they do. So let's talk about our final subject, which is malware. Malware today is all about the Benjamins, and for those of you who are not hip and don't know what it is, Benjamins is money. There was a time when viruses were usually just intended to wreak some sort of havoc. They would delete files or corrupt files, or in some cases just see how far their virus could spread before it got contained to make a name for themselves out on the internet. Nowadays, it's about money. They're trying to get money out of you. So let's look at some of the things that malware do. Malware can disrupt businesses by crippling networks and servers. Malware can steal, delete, or corrupt data. They can spam the world, in other words, send junk email all over the world and it looks like it's coming from your computer. They can also run scams to get money. For example, there was one a little while ago where you get a message pops up saying your computer has 1,500 infections. Click here, pay $29.99 and we'll clean it. You click, you pay the money, and it says, congratulations, you're clean, and there was never anything there to begin with. It's just a scam. They can also steal personal identities And of course, they can again provide control of your computer to a hacker or an attacker. The biggest threat, however, that we face today is something called ransomware. Let's look at what that is. First of all, ransomware infections occur usually from phishing. 95% of ransomware infections occurred because someone clicked on an email attachment or a link in an email. It's called phishing. They send you something to try to get you to click on it, and these people can really be really clever in wording these emails to try to get you to make those clicks. The other 5% are called drive-by installations. These happen when you visit an infected website, and while you're viewing the content of that website, something is downloading in the background that has infected your computer. Ransomware used to only affect the computer that it originally got on, but nowadays ransomware acts like worms and will attempt to spread to other computers across the network. So instead of one infection, you may now have 50 or 80 or 100. What they then do is they scramble the contents, or they encrypt important data files, not only on your computer, but also on any network drives that you have connected. They encrypt those files with a key, and then they demand a fee to receive the key that's needed to decrypt those files. If you don't pay them, they don't give you the key. Without that key, you cannot recover those files. The encryption they use is usually 2048-bit RSA encryption, which is next to impossible to crack. RSA Corporation, who came up with this, has a standing $300,000 reward for anyone that can prove they can crack it, and so far they haven't had to pay it. There's often a time limit. After the time limit, one of two things happen. Either the ransom goes up a little bit and they give you more time, or they simply destroy the key. Eventually, they're going to do that anyway, and you'll never get your files back without that key. Also, there have been reports of second ransoms being demanded. For example, you pay the ransom, and then they come back and say, well, we want more money before we give you that key. Those situations are pretty rare, but they have happened a few times. Ransoms usually start at around $300, and they go up from there depending on the importance of the data. Now, there was a hospital in California a couple of years ago that got infected with ransomware, and it was so bad that they had to literally shut down every computer in the hospital, and they were literally running the hospital on pencil and paper. Now, someone told me that there was an episode of Grey's Anatomy that featured this exact story. What happened here was they called in the FBI. The FBI was on site for 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, the FBI said, pay them, because we can't crack this. They wound up having to pay $17,000. Now, my understanding is that Grey's Anatomy episode, someone found a way to get past the encryption, and they got their files back. That's television. Has to have a happy ending on television. It's a morality tale. Bad guy can't win. In real life, the bad guy often wins, and in this case, they usually do. So let's look at some more scary stuff about ransomware. Ransomware infections increased by 6,000% in 2016. Haven't been able to find 2017 numbers yet because it's still early in the year, but I'm sure they'll probably be comparable. Also, over 70% of companies that were attacked by ransomware paid the ransoms. Of those, 50% paid more than $10,000 and 20% paid more than $40,000. So imagine you click on what you think is just a harmless link or attachment and wind up costing your station $40,000. You're not going to feel very comfortable about that. Probably won't sleep for a few days. Attackers collected over $1 billion in ransoms in 2016, and I expect that number to be comparable, if not more, for 2017. Now, here's something that's really confusing. The FBI recommends paying the ransom because they can't crack 2048-bit RSA either. However, you walk out that door and walk into another door of the FBI building, and you're going to have someone telling you, don't pay the ransom, contact law enforcement instead. So here's the thing. If the FBI is confused about how you should handle a ransomware infection, isn't that all the more reason for you to make sure that you protect yourself and take steps to make sure you don't become a victim in the first place? There's also been reports of people who have paid the ransoms and have not gotten the key to get their files. That's pretty rare and actually unexpected because the attackers actually have a vested interest in giving you the key, because if the word gets around that they're not paying people, then if they're not giving people that key, then no one's going to pay them. And they're in this for money. So that's kind of surprising, but there have been a few reports of that happening. Finally, backups are a really good way of avoiding having to pay the ransom, because if your files get encrypted, just delete those, restore good ones from a backup. However, there are ransomware programs now that actually look for backups of files and will attempt to encrypt those as well. What we do here at WHAS, when we back up our servers, we back that information up to external drives, which we then disconnect from the computer and store them off-site for safekeeping, and we just keep rotating them. So that data is pretty safe. So with all of this going on, the best thing to do is prevention, right? So let's talk a little bit about prevention and recovery. First of all, don't be careless and don't be fooled by phishing attempts. Secondly, don't visit questionable websites. Now, how do you know if a website's questionable? Well, if you have to ask, is this website questionable? That in itself being a question means yes, that's a questionable site. The caveat to that, however, is we are a news gathering organization, and it's sometimes necessary to visit sites that may be questionable in order to gather information for news stories. How do you handle that? Simply be aware of what can happen and be careful and be watchful. And I'll talk more about that in a second. Remember that even legitimate websites may be hacked. A site you may have visited days and days and days ago may have gotten infected last night. You visit that site today and you wind up infected. Also, make sure that you save all files, especially critical files, to locations that are backed up. Now, if your computer starts acting strange, let's say, for example, your mouse cursor starts moving around the screen and you're not touching your mouse. What do? Well, in a situation like that, reach around, yank the power cord, call IT. That's it. Yank the power cord, call IT. You may corrupt some Windows files, but all that means is next time you turn that computer on, Windows has to repair those files. It'll take a little bit longer for it to boot up. Now, some people say don't disconnect the power cord, just disconnect the network cable. But how many users really know which of the cables coming out of the back of a computer is the network cable? Power cord's a lot easier to recognize. It's the large black cable. Yank that, call IT. Now, what happens if you do that and you call us and we come and investigate, and it turns out that there's no infection on your computer? What's going to happen? Well, we're going to laugh at you, basically. And that's it. But it's better to have us laugh at you than have someone at corporate with a briefcase and a suit on frowning at you. You don't want that. So, again, yank the power cord, call IT. That's not the time to be trying to think of what you should do. Go over that in your mind and remember that. So, let's summarize. What I always tell people is don't be afraid, just be aware. You don't have to be afraid. Just be aware of what can happen and be prepared to act if something does happen. It's what you do that really matters. So let's look at this. Fear, paranoia, and panic are counterproductive and unnecessary. No need to be afraid, no need to be paranoid, and there's no need to panic. At the same time, however, carelessness, foolishness, and lack of awareness are just as counterproductive, and they're also dangerous because this is exactly what hackers are looking for. They're looking for people who take a lackadaisical attitude towards cybersecurity. For example, people who don't reboot their computers every day. They say, well, I've been going all these years and I've never rebooted my computer and it's never caused a problem. Again, that's exactly the kind of attitude they want you to have. It only takes once. Also, be aware of what can happen, and a good idea is to have a fire drill, for example. Go over in your mind, what would I do if my computer suddenly starts acting in a way that's totally abnormal? You use your computer every day, you tend to know what's normal. If all of a sudden, from 1 minute to the next, your computer's doing something really abnormal, then you need to be able to act. That's not the time to try to figure out what you should do. It should be an automatic thing. My computer's not acting right, yank the power cord, call IT. Also, if you get a suspicious email message, it's okay if you want to forward that to us, but also make sure you forward it to infosec@tegna.com. They read every message they get. If they get 5,000 messages a day, they read 5,000. And the reason they want these is because if they get a bunch of the same messages from different stations, then they know that they have a pretty widespread issue and they can warn people. Finally, if you are unsure about anything at all, just ask. We're not here to punish you if you get it wrong. We're here to make sure that you get it right. So we have no problem. Ask us any question regarding security and we'll be happy to give you an answer. If there are no further questions, thank you for your time and have a safe 2018.